It was a giant, untamable horse that no man could break. As they prepared to put it down, a broken-down cowboy stepped forward and gave it a strange, heartbreaking name. Sorrow. This is the story of how a man had to tame his own past before he could ride into the future. The Stockton auction yard was a cauldron of dust and desperation, baking under a relentless sun that bleached the very color from the sky. The air, thick enough to taste, was a gritty cocktail of dry earth, sweat, and the sharp, coppery scent of fear. At the absolute center of this chaos, contained by a fence that seemed impossibly fragile, was a horse that looked as if it had been carved from a mountain's shadow. He was a giant, a magnificent black stallion whose muscles bunched and coiled like knotted oak beneath a coat as dark as a starless, moonless night. But his breathtaking beauty was completely eclipsed by a terrifying, untamable fury. Captured from the wild, high country weeks ago, he was a living storm, a force of nature that refused to be bent to the will of man. He had fought every attempt to be broken. The strongest corral posts, thick as a man's thigh, were scarred with deep splinters from his kicks. The most experienced riders in the territory had been thrown from his back in seconds, left bruised and humbled in the dirt. Now he stood in the center of the ring, not bridled, but entangled in a brutal web of heavy, rusted chains, a testament to the sheer force required just to contain him. His eyes, wild and intelligent, rolled with a defiant fire, promising violence to any who dared approach. The auctioneer, a portly, red-faced man named Barton, had finally admitted defeat. His voice, which usually boomed with the manufactured confidence of a practiced salesman, was now thin and laced with a weary frustration. He wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand and declared the horse worthless, a beautiful but dangerous beast fit only for the knacker's yard. $5. Do I hear $5 for this black devil before we put him out of everyone's misery? A grim silence fell over the crowd. No one moved. The only sound was the heavy, rhythmic clanking of the chains as the horse paced. With a final, disgusted sigh, Barton gave a curt nod to one of his handlers. The man grimly raised a rifle, its barrel glinting in the harsh sunlight. They were about to witness the sad, violent end of a magnificent, but broken, spirit. It was then that a man stepped out from the edge of the crowd. He was not an impressive figure. He moved like a frayed shadow, his shoulders slumped with a weight that had nothing to do with physical labor. It was Levi Thorne. A year ago, his name was spoken with a kind of hushed reverence, the name of the territory's greatest rodeo champion, a man who seemed to dance with wild animals. Now, his name was whispered with pity, if it was spoken at all. He was a ghost, a broken man who haunted the edges of the life he once dominated, his eyes holding the permanent twilight of a soul that had seen too much. The town knew his story, a tragic accident at the height of his fame, a horse that had bolted, a buckle that had snapped. His younger brother, Cody, full of life and dreams of his own championships, trampled underfoot in the ensuing chaos. Levi had walked away from the arena that day and had never looked back, trading his silver buckles for the bitter solace of a whiskey bottle and the silent, unending torment of his own guilt. He walked into the center of the corral now, his boots scuffing softly in the deep dust, ignoring the nervous shouts of Barton's handlers. He didn't look at the men, he only had eyes for the horse. The giant stallion, sensing this new, quiet presence, stopped its frantic struggling. It stood still, its great chest heaving, and fixed its intelligent eyes on Levi. For a long, electric moment, the man and the horse were locked in a silent, profound communication that no one else could understand. They were speaking the universal language of broken things. The crowd saw a broken cowboy and a dangerous animal, but Levi saw something else entirely. He saw the chains around the horse's neck and felt the phantom weight of the chains of guilt around his own heart. He saw the wild, untamable grief that raged in the horse's eyes, a fury born of loss and confusion. He saw a creature lashing out at the world because it was trapped by a pain it could not voice. He saw a mirror. From the stands, Clara Dawson, the ranch owner's daughter, watched, her hands clasped tightly together, her heart aching for him. She was the only one in town who looked at Levi Thorne and saw not a failure, but a good man drowning in a sea of sorrow. She saw the flicker of recognition, of a deep, painful kinship pass across Levi's face as he stared at the horse. She knew this was more than just a man looking at an animal. Levi took another step forward. He spoke, his voice not loud, but a low, rough whisper that seemed to carry across the entire silent yard. He was not making a bid. He was giving a name so strange, so personal, so full of pain that a shocked murmur rippled through the stunned crowd. Sorrow. He then turned to the auctioneer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single, worn silver dollar, its details smoothed away by time. He told Barton that was his price. $1 for the unbreakable horse. Barton, eager to be rid of the beast and perhaps moved by the raw, undeniable emotion of the moment, simply nodded. The deal was done. As the handlers cautiously, nervously, unchained the giant stallion, Clara watched as Levi, the man who had lost everything, willingly took on the one creature in the world that was as broken and as dangerous as his own memories. He didn't see a worthless horse. He saw a chance at redemption. And she, in that moment, was the only one who understood that in naming the horse Sorrow, Levi wasn't just buying an animal. He was finally, after a year of running, confronting his own soul. Bringing Sorrow to the Dawson Ranch was a battle of wills. The horse fought the entire journey, a storm of black fury that strained the ropes and the nerves of the three experienced ranch hands tasked with leading him. Clara's father, a pragmatic and hard-nosed cattleman named Jeb Dawson, took one look at the wild-eyed beast and the quiet, broken man who now owned him, and declared Levi a fool. He saw not a chance at redemption, but a bad investment and a danger to his entire herd. Mr. Dawson, his voice is a gruff, impatient bark. 1 month, Thorne. That's what you get. If that beast isn't broken for a saddle by the first frost, I'll be the one to put the bullet in its head myself. No arguments. Mr. Dawson gave Levi the most remote corral on the property, a dusty, forgotten circle of wood half a mile from the main stables. It was an act of quarantine to prevent the stallion's violent, chaotic energy from spooking the valuable quarter horses. Levi did not argue. He simply nodded, his eyes never leaving the horse. He led Sorrow into the dusty circle, slid the heavy gate shut, and began his work. But it was not the kind of work anyone expected. He did not bring a whip. He did not bring spurs. He did not even bring a saddle. For the first week, he did nothing at all. He would simply walk into the corral with a bucket of fresh water and a bag of oats, place them by the fence, and then walk to the center of the ring and sit on the ground. He would sit there for hours, from the cool mists of sunrise to the long shadows of sunset, in complete silence. At first, Sorrow was a whirlwind of aggression. He treated Levi's presence as a personal affront. He would charge the fence, his hooves like thunder, kicking up clouds of choking dust. He would snort and stamp, his ears pinned back in a clear display of rage. He would rear up, a terrifying black silhouette against the sky, his massive front hooves crashing down just feet from where Levi sat, a clear and violent threat. But Levi never moved. He never flinched. He just sat, his presence a quiet, unmovable rock in the center of the horse's storm. He was not there to dominate. He was there to endure. He was showing the horse that his anger, his fear, his lashing out would not drive him away. He was showing him that he was not afraid of the darkness, because he lived in it himself. Clara watched this strange, silent ritual from a distance, often hidden by the shade of a large oak tree on a nearby hill. The other ranch hands scoffed, their laughter carried on the wind. They took bets on how long it would be before Levi gave up, or was carried out on a stretcher. They called him the horse-whispering fool. But Clara saw something else. She saw a profound, heartbreaking patience she had never witnessed before. She saw a man treating a broken animal not with force, but with a quiet, unwavering empathy that spoke of a deep, shared wound. After the first long week, a subtle change began. Sorrow's furious charges became less frequent. The violent energy began to ebb, replaced by a restless, confused pacing. He still kept his distance, circling Levi like a wary wolf, but he would occasionally stop, turn his great head, and simply watch the silent man in the center, his intelligent eyes filled with a dawning curiosity. It was then, when the anger had quieted enough to listen, that Levi began to speak. He didn't shout commands. He whispered. His voice was a low, constant murmur, a stream of quiet, broken words that the wind almost carried away. Clara, creeping closer one afternoon, her curiosity overcoming her hesitation, hid behind the corral fence and listened. He was not talking to the horse. He was confessing to it. He spoke of a dusty rodeo arena, of the roar of the crowd that sounded like the ocean, of the scent of popcorn and cheap liquor that always hung in the air. He spoke of his younger brother, Cody, of his bright, hopeful smile, of his boundless energy, of his dream to be a champion just like him. With a voice thick with a guilt that was still as raw as an open wound, he spoke of the final ride. He described the feel of the powerful, bucking horse beneath him, the explosive energy as the gate flew open, and then the moment that had shattered his life. A cinch that had come loose, a sudden, violent, twisting buck he wasn't prepared for. He described the sickening feeling of falling, the flash of Cody's terrified face as his younger brother, in a foolish, selfless act of courage, rushed into the arena to help him. He spoke of the sound of the crowd's roar turning into a collective, horrified gasp, a sound that haunted his sleep. He spoke of the heavy, terrible, ringing silence that followed. He was telling his story, his deepest, most painful secret, to the only creature he felt could understand his own untamable grief. He was pouring his broken soul into the heart of the wild horse. And the horse, as if sensing the shared pain in the man's voice, began to listen. Day by day, it would stand a little closer, its restless pacing slowing to a standstill, its ears pricked, listening to the sad, quiet symphony of the man's whispered confession.
It was my fault.
Clara would often leave a canteen of fresh water or a plate of food on the fence post for Levi, never interrupting, never letting him know she was listening to his heartbreaking therapy. Her admiration for him grew into something deeper, something warmer. She saw past the broken rodeo star, past the quiet ranch hand, and saw a man of incredible gentleness and a strength of spirit that far surpassed his physical prowess. The unbreakable horse and the broken man were, in their own strange, silent way, beginning to heal each other. 3 weeks had passed on the Dawson Ranch. 3 weeks of Levi's patient, heartbreaking ritual. The remote corral, once a battleground of fury and fear, had transformed into a space of quiet contemplation. The other ranch hands, seeing no dramatic breaking of the horse, had long since lost interest, dismissing Levi's efforts as a fool's errand and returning to their usual gossip and card games. But Clara continued her silent vigil, watching from afar whenever her chores allowed. She was captivated by the slow, sacred dance of healing that was unfolding. She saw the profound change in the horse, sorrow. The wild, panicked fire in his eyes had been banked, replaced by a deep, watchful intelligence. He no longer paced the fence line like a caged animal. He would stand for hours, a magnificent black statue, listening to the soft, unending river of Levi's voice. Levi himself was changing. The haunted, hollowed-out look was still there, a permanent shadow in the back of his eyes. But it was softer now. The simple act of speaking his grief aloud, of giving his pain a name and a voice day after day, seemed to be lifting a small part of the immense weight he carried. Clara noticed he was drinking less in the evenings, his hands less prone to the subtle tremors she had seen when he first arrived. He was still a man in mourning, but he was no longer a man actively drowning in it. He was treading water, and the horse was his lifeline. The breakthrough, when it came, was as quiet and as profound as a prayer. It was a still, hot afternoon, the air thick and heavy. Levi was sitting in his usual spot, his voice a low, raspy murmur, recounting the moments after the accident, the terrible, suffocating silence of the ride home, the look on his parents' faces. As he spoke, his voice cracking with the memory, Sorrow, who had been standing a dozen feet away, took a slow, deliberate step forward, then another, and another. He walked with a calm, almost solemn purpose until his massive head was just inches from Levi's shoulder. He stood there for a long, breathless moment, his warm breath stirring Levi's hair, the scent of horse and prairie filling the air. Levi fell silent, his body going rigid. He didn't dare to move, didn't dare to breathe. He could feel the horse's immense power, the heat radiating from its body, the gentle curiosity in its presence. Then, Sorrow did something that made Clara, watching from her hiding spot, gasp and press her hand to her mouth. He lowered his great head and gently, tentatively, nudged Levi's shoulder with his soft muzzle. It was not a demand or a threat. It was a sign, a question, an offering of comfort from one grieving soul to another. Tears streamed silently down Levi's face, tracing clean paths through the dust on his cheeks. He slowly, so slowly, raised a trembling hand. He did not reach for the reins or the mane, the tools of a master. He simply extended his hand, palm open, the gesture of a supplicant. He rested it gently on the horse's cheek, his fingers sinking into the coarse, warm hair. The horse did not flinch. He did not pull away. He leaned into the touch, a low, soft nicker rumbling deep in his chest. It was the first time since Levi had bought him that man and horse had made physical contact. It was a moment of absolute, profound trust, a surrender, not of the horse's will to the man, but of two grieving souls to each other. In that single, quiet touch, a decade of Levi's guilt began to loosen its death grip on his heart. That evening, inspired and deeply moved by the incredible breakthrough she had witnessed, Clara decided it was time to break her own silence. She found Levi not in the rowdy bunkhouse, but sitting on the top rail of the corral, watching Sorrow, who now stood calmly in the center of the ring, bathed in the soft light of the rising moon. She walked up to him, holding a plate with a thick slice of apple pie and 2 forks. She didn't speak at first, simply offered him the plate. He took it with a small, surprised, and genuinely grateful smile. For a long time, they ate in a comfortable silence, watching the horse. It was Clara who finally spoke, her voice soft. "He looks peaceful. I think he's tired of fighting. We both are." She didn't ask him about his brother. She didn't ask about the accident or the whispers she had overheard. She knew instinctively that he had already confessed those things to the horse. Instead, she asked him about what he saw in Sorrow that day at the auction, why he had chosen him. "I didn't see a monster. I saw a memory. He was lashing out because he was trapped by a pain he couldn't explain. I understood that." And in that simple, honest answer, Clara understood everything. She saw the profound depth of his empathy, the quiet strength of his spirit. The connection she had felt from a distance was now a real, tangible thing between them. It was the beginning of their own slow, patient journey of trust, a journey that mirrored the one he had just forged with a horse named Sorrow. In the weeks that followed, the bond between Levi and Sorrow deepened into a quiet miracle, a source of wonder for the entire Dawson Ranch. The heavy chains were a distant memory, replaced by a simple leather halter. Levi could now walk with the horse, lead him, even brush his magnificent black coat without a hint of fear from either of them. He was not breaking the horse's spirit, he was healing it, and in doing so, he was healing himself. Clara would often join them, her quiet presence becoming a welcome part of their daily ritual. The sight of the three of them, the gentle woman, the broken man, and the wild horse standing together in the golden light of sunset became a symbol of a fragile, burgeoning hope. But this newfound success did not go unnoticed, and in the dark corners of the bunkhouse, it bred a venomous jealousy. A brutish, arrogant ranch hand named Gage had long fancied himself the top horseman on the ranch. More than that, he had been quietly and unsuccessfully courting Clara for months. He saw the growing admiration in Clara's eyes when she looked at Levi, and he interpreted Levi's patient, gentle methods as a personal insult to his own forceful, masculine techniques. He saw weakness where Clara saw strength. He decided it was time to show everyone who the real master horseman was, and to put the fallen champion back in his place. One afternoon, while Levi was away mending a fence on the far pasture, Gage saw his chance. With a cruel, confident grin, he strode into Sorrow's corral. He was not armed with patience. He was armed with a heavy leather whip and a set of sharp, wicked-looking spurs. Clara, seeing him from the main house, felt a cold knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She ran out onto the porch, shouting for him to stop, to leave the horse alone. But he just laughed, ignoring her pleas. "Don't you worry your pretty head, Miss Dawson. Time for this brute to learn who's boss. Time for a real man to show this fool how it's done." He approached Sorrow with an aggressive, predatory swagger, the whip cracking in the air like a gunshot. The horse, which had only known patience and quiet words from Levi for over a month, was instantly terrified. The trust, so carefully built, shattered. The wild, panic fire returned to its eyes. It reared back, its great body trembling, the whites of its eyes showing. When Gage lunged forward, grabbing the halter and attempting to vault onto the terrified animal's back, Sorrow lashed out, not with malice, but with pure, instinctual terror. A powerful kick from his hind legs, aimed at the perceived threat, sent Gage flying. He landed in a crumpled heap, his leg bent at an unnatural angle, a sharp, sickening crack echoing across the silent yard. The chaos brought Mr. Dawson running from the main house, a rifle in his hands. He saw Gage writhing on the ground in agony, and the giant black stallion, now a storm of terror, circling the corral, snorting and kicking. His face hardened into a mask of cold, pragmatic fury. He saw not the context, but the result, a dangerous, unpredictable animal that had just crippled one of his best men. He stormed into the house and returned with a box of cartridges. When Levi returned at sunset, it was to a scene of grim finality. Pike was being carried away on a makeshift stretcher. Mr. Dawson stood by the corral fence, the rifle now loaded, his face set like stone. And Clara was standing in front of him, pleading, her body a fragile shield, begging her father not to shoot the horse, arguing that it was Gage's own cruelty that had provoked the attack. But her father was unmovable. The horse was a menace. It had crossed a line. It had to be put down. No, the word was a raw, agonized cry from Levi's throat. He ran, vaulting the fence, and stood between Mr. Dawson's rifle and the terrified horse, shielding the animal with his own body. He begged him to reconsider, telling him it wasn't the horse's fault. But Mr. Dawson refused to listen. It was then, with the rifle aimed at the heart of the creature he had worked so hard to save, that Levi was forced to reveal the final, shocking truth of his obsession. He turned to Clara, his face pale, his voice trembling with the weight of a confession he had never intended to make. This was the plot twist, the secret reason for his patient crusade. He told her to look at the horse's left flank, at an old, faded scar, half hidden beneath the dark coat, a scar shaped like a jagged lightning bolt. The Rodeo, the day Cody died, the horse that threw me, the one that trampled him, had a scar, the exact same scar. The revelation hung in the air, stunning Clara into silence. It wasn't just a horse, it was the horse, the living, breathing embodiment of Levi's greatest failure, his deepest sorrow. He explained that he had recognized the scar the moment he saw the horse at the auction. He hadn't just bought a wild animal, he had bought the ghost that haunted his nightmares. "I have to do this, Clara. I have to save him. If I can heal the wildness in him, the fear that made him lash out, then maybe I can finally forgive myself. Taming him is the only way I can tame my own regret." Clara finally understood everything. The strange name, the infinite patience, the whispered confessions. This was not about breaking a horse. This was about a man desperately trying to rewrite the most tragic chapter of his life. It was his only path to redemption, and she knew, in that moment, that she would do anything in her power to help him find it. Levi's confession, raw and steeped in a decade of guilt, hung heavy in the air, thick with the dust of the corral. For a moment, it seemed to soften the hard, pragmatic lines on Mr. Dawson's face. He knew the story of Levi's brother, as everyone in the territory did, a tragedy that had become a local legend. But his sympathy was a fleeting thing, quickly extinguished by the cold, hard reality of a crippled ranch hand and a 1,000-pound animal that had just proven its dangerous unpredictability. He saw not a man's quest for redemption, but a bad investment that had just turned violent. His finger remained firm on the trigger. A story is just a story, Thorne. A broken leg is a fact. The horse is a liability. It has to be destroyed. It was in that moment of absolute desperation, with the life of the horse and his own chance at peace about to be extinguished by a single pragmatic bullet, that Levi Thorne, the broken champion, made his final, all-in gamble. He looked not at the rifle, but directly into the eyes of the ranch owner, the man who held their fate in his hands. He spoke of the upcoming regional rodeo in Cheyenne, the biggest event of the year, just 1 month away. He spoke of its grand prize for the saddle bronc competition, a sum of money so large it could change any rancher's fortune. And he spoke, respectfully but directly, of Mr. Dawson's own troubles, which were a poorly kept secret in the valley. A series of bad winters and cattle losses had left the proud Dawson ranch teetering on the edge of a deep financial debt. Then, Levi laid out his wager, his voice steady and clear, the voice of a man with nothing left to lose. He, Levi Thorne, would enter the Cheyenne Rodeo, and he would ride Sorrow. The proposal was insane. A gasp went through the few ranch hands who had gathered to watch the grim scene. To ride an untamed, wild horse in a brutal competition like saddle bronc riding was not just dangerous, it was suicidal. It was a spectacle of violence, the very thing he had tried to heal the horse from. But Levi was not finished. He laid out the terms of the bet, his eyes never leaving Mr. Dawson's. If he won, the entire prize purse, every last dollar, would go to Mr. Dawson. It would be enough to clear all the ranch's debts and secure its future for years to come. In return, Levi would earn the right to keep the horse, his debt of $1 considered paid in full. But if he lost, or if the horse, in its wildness, seriously injured or killed him in the attempt, then Mr. Dawson could have his way. He could put the horse down without a word of protest. And if Levi survived but failed, he would pack his bags and leave the ranch that very day, disappearing from their lives forever. It was a wager of everything against nothing. His life, his future, and the horse's very existence, all staked on one impossible 8-second ride. Mr. Dawson, a shrewd businessman and a gambler at heart, was intrigued despite himself. He looked from the desperate, determined face of the cowboy to the magnificent, powerful form of the black stallion. He saw the potential, the raw, explosive power that, if controlled, could win any rodeo. The risk was enormous, but the reward could save his legacy. Against his better judgment, a slow, calculating smile spread across his face. He lowered the rifle. He agreed. The deal was struck. But as the two men sealed their grim pact, a third voice, clear and defiant, cut through the air. It was Clara. She had been standing silently, her heart breaking as she listened to Levi's confession and his desperate gamble. Now, she stepped forward, placing herself firmly between her father and Levi. If he rides, he will not do it alone. I will help him train. Mr. Dawson stared at his daughter in disbelief. He forbade it, calling it foolishness, telling her to stay out of a matter between men. But Clara did not back down. She looked not at her father, but at Levi, her eyes shining with a fierce, unwavering loyalty that went far beyond simple admiration. She told her father that Levi had shown this horse a kindness and patience that no one else would, and that she, in turn, would show him that same faith. She had made her choice. She was no longer just a spectator. She was his partner. Her all-in moment was not a wager of money or property, but of her own heart.
I'm so sorry.
She was standing with a broken champion against the judgment of her own father, ready to help him tame the wild, beautiful beast that was his own sorrow. The month leading up to the Cheyenne Rodeo was a testament to a faith shared between three wounded souls. Every day, from the first light of dawn till the last rays of sunset, Levi, Clara, and Sorrow worked together. It was not a typical training. There was no violence, no breaking of spirit. It was a negotiation, a slow, patient dance of understanding. Clara, with her quiet encouragement and keen eye for the horse's subtle cues, became the bridge between man and animal. She would soothe Sorrow when the training became too intense, her gentle voice a balm on his frayed nerves. She would place a reassuring hand on Levi's arm when his own frustration and fear threatened to overwhelm him. Levi, in turn, taught the horse not to fear man, but to trust a partner. He never used spurs. He used gentle pressure, soft words, and an almost mystical anticipation of the horse's movements. He was not preparing for a battle. He was choreographing a dance. Slowly, miraculously, the horse named Sorrow began to respond not just to Levi, but to their combined presence, a fragile, powerful trinity of trust. The day of the rodeo arrived, hot and unforgiving. The air was thick with the smell of dust, sweat, and cheap whiskey. As Levi led Sorrow into the chutes, a wave of hostile whispers followed him. The crowd saw the return of the fallen champion, the man whose failure had cost his brother's life. And they saw the untamable black beast that had crippled a man just a month prior. They were not expecting a victory. They were expecting a bloodbath. Mr. Dawson stood in the stands, his face grim, a man watching a risky investment. But Clara stood by the railing, her hands clasped in prayer, her heart beating in time with Levi's. In the narrow, claustrophobic confines of the chute, Levi mounted the massive stallion. There was no saddle, only a simple rigging clutched in one hand. He looked down not at a wild, raging animal, but at a partner. He leaned down, his lips close to the horse's twitching ear, and whispered one last thing, a promise only they could understand. "This one's for you, Cody. This one is for honor." Then he nodded. The gate flew open. What the crowd witnessed next was not a violent battle for dominance. It was poetry. It was a dance between shadow and man. Sorrow exploded into the arena not with the panicked, chaotic fury of a terrified animal, but with a controlled, magnificent power. He bucked, he spun, he soared across the dusty ground, his movements a breathtaking display of raw, wild freedom, unleashed but not uncontrolled. And on his back, Levi was not just a rider. He was a part of him. He moved with the horse, anticipating every twist, every powerful leap, his body a perfect, fluid extension of the animal's will. There was no fear between them. There was only a profound, absolute, and hard-won trust. For 8 glorious, heart-stopping seconds, they held the world captive. It was not a ride of domination. It was a ride of mutual understanding, a breathtaking display of two spirits, once broken, now finally in harmony. When the buzzer sounded and the pickup men rode in to help, Sorrow slowed to a canter, his great chest heaving, but his eyes were calm. They had won. The crowd, stunned into silence for a moment, erupted in a deafening, thunderous roar. They had not just seen a rodeo ride. They had witnessed a miracle. Levi Thorne, the broken-down failure, was a champion once more. But as he slid from the horse's back onto the soft dirt of the arena, his gaze swept past the cheering crowd, past his stunned father-in-law, and found Clara. She was clinging to the fence, tears of joy and relief streaming down her face. The real victory was not the prize money or the roar of the crowd. It was in her eyes. He walked towards her, the world seeming to fade away, until only she remained. In that moment, in the center of the dusty arena, he finally tamed his own sorrow. He reached over the fence, took her face in his hands, and kissed her, a kiss that sealed a promise of a new future, a life no longer defined by the ghosts of the past. 1 year later, the Dawson Ranch was thriving, its debts paid, its future secure. It was now the Dawson Thorne Ranch. Levi and Clara were married, their partnership in the corral having blossomed into a deep and abiding love. The quiet, broken man was gone, replaced by a husband and father whose easy laughter now filled the halls of the main house. And in the farthest pasture, a magnificent black stallion ran free with a family of his own. He was no longer a prisoner of chains or a symbol of a painful past. Levi had given him a new name, one that fit the new life they had all found together. He was no longer called Sorrow. He was called Hope,